Hey, welcome to Quick Take. I'm one of your hosts, Susie Tomachuk, along with James Capps. How are you, James?
Hey, Susie, I'm super great. How about yourself?
I'm good. I'm good. I was in a meeting yesterday, actually. It was the kickoff that the business unit was having. And one of the things that the chief person that was running the meeting said, she wanted all these people, they were all leaders on the phone call, to start doing skip levels.
Oh, yeah.
And and so it was good, but you know what happened after the meeting? I got a call from a senior leader that said an email that said, "Hey, can you and I get together and talk about what is a skip level?"
Yeah.
And it made
It's a
me
great
realize, like,
question.
that's a general thing. Everybody just thinks, "Oh, skip level
Skip
means you
level.
have meetings that are skip a level." But I think there's more to it than that, and there should be some parameters or discussion about what that truly means. What do you
Boy, I
think?
think I totally agree with you. And I think that, like many things, we have terms and phrases that we throw around as executive leaders. And if we want a specific outcome, we have to be clear with our teams. That
Mhm.
clarity and having good requirements, if you will, and good definition will
Yeah.
ensure your outcome. And not only that, though, I think because skip levels are also creating a dialogue, and they can be dangerous. You've got
Yeah.
to do them correctly. And we'll definitely jump in really quick as to what I think they are. But if done wrong, I think they can actually undermine your organization's
Mhm.
trust, the dialogue you have, the way that you communicate internally. If skip
Yeah.
levels turn into more of a session of trying to get information behind people's back, you're certainly not going to get the outcome that perhaps that leader expected when she mandated everyone do a skip level.
Yeah, and I think that's so true, and it then that what that does is it impedes a lack of trust, and then people
Absolutely.
start to it's gonna breed, like, it's a culture of its own,
Right. Right.
and if it does become something where people can air their dirty laundry,
Hmm.
and then they're successful in it, that's just gonna create more and more of it
Right.
happening,
Right.
and
Let's take a step back.
ego's
Let's
involved. All right, go ahead.
let's take a step back and define them. Let's see if you and I agree with what a skip level is.
Oh.
Because I believe a skip level is when a leader at a level, and it could be any level, skips the level below and has a meeting with that their direct reports team. Now that can be one-on-one, that could be in a group setting, but in my mind, it's an opportunity to get an unfiltered perspective from a skip level down, to allow clarity and communication.
Mhm.
Ideally, that information you get from that skip level meeting is the same information you're getting from the manager in the middle. But and if that's the case, then really the outcome is creating harmony and transparency. If it's not, it's highlighting an issue. But at the end of the day, that the skip level is a downward skip to allow a leader direct access to their team. What do you think?
Yeah.
Is that how you
I
define it?
Yep. That's how I define it. When you were talking, I was also thinking that it does allow that leader to get some additional insights and some
Hmm.
context maybe. It should be the
Hmm.
same, but
Hmm.
it's not going to be exactly the same.
Absolutely.
But it also gives that feeling of I have access to
Hmm.
that leader. So
Yep.
it
Right.
also is a good message to
Hmm.
have around that because
Right.
it opens up the dialogue.
Right. I agree. And
But
I think
yes, we
one
agree.
element there, which is so important, is the frequency. Because I think, like many things, you can't do a skip level once. Right? That's
Yes,
intimidation.
right. Once Yeah,
I want to talk to you
exactly.
behind your boss's back, and I want you to be honest and don't lie. Right?
Yeah.
We've all been in that meeting. That's where nothing is said. You say everything is great, and you walk away going, somebody's getting fired. The whole point of
Yeah.
a skip level, in my mind, is that it is a part of a broader process to keep an ongoing dialogue within the organization, and everything we described today as some of best practices, I think, are predicated on the fact that this is not a one and done. And I think what's
Yes.
important to describe, what your example and the person you were working with, she mandated it. Strike one. She didn't start off by saying, "I want you to have regular, frequent skip
Yeah.
levels." Because
Yeah.
if you don't just start with that, then somebody's going to come back in fourth quarter and say, I did skip levels. You
Yeah.
kick that scab a little bit. When did you do it? I did it in February. It was fine. That's not a
Right.
skip level. So I
Yeah.
think that's a real key element of this, is it's got to be part of a more frequent conversation.
Yeah, and it has to be agreed on. To
Hmm.
your point
Right.
at the start, it reminds me of when we used to work together. One of our peers, our CEO, was going to go into the operating rooms and visit, and that was the idea, and that just to get more of
Hmm.
comfort, I
Right.
guess. And the CEO said, "No, if I go in there, they'll make a mistake on air."
Right. Right. Right.
And our friend said, "Yes, they will the first time."
Yes. But the ninth
And that's
time,
the whole
right? And that was
point.
exactly right. That
Right.
was exactly right.
Yeah.
And to be clear, those operating rooms were television network
I know.
operation rooms,
When I said
not
that,
surgical
I
rooms.
know, but
It was
I did
okay if
like
they
to
made a
linger
mistake the
in
first
that.
three times.
I like to think I was a doctor or a surgeon just for a
Yeah,
nanosecond.
but your risk tolerance was way too low on that.
That's
So
fair.
yeah, on air mistakes are one thing, surgical mistakes are another. But
Fair enough. Fair enough.
as we
Okay.
dive in, I think there's, I was reading a really great article around um, neuroscience and how leaders can get additional information, and how one of the big topics they're talking about was about how you can get additional um, insights by having people outside of your immediate circle to provide you input. And I think that's really my first key element is, when you're doing a skip level, think of it as a means by expanding your input set. So it's one thing to do a skip level to
Huh.
your, down the guy right below you. But if your skip levels are right good, you're not only getting deeper into the organization, but you're also getting different points of view. You're going to talk to folks. Maybe if you're the
Yeah.
CTO, you're going to talk to the marketing folks. If you're a CTO, you're going to talk to the legal, because that neuroscience has shown that by bringing a different points of view into your mind, into your conversation, it's going to make you more creative, but also you're going to find ways to solve problems differently than you perhaps thought you would.
So I guess so is the best practice here that you as a leader kind of look across the organization that you have influence,
Right.
and you pick people within that
Hmm.
organization that you have a skip level with. So you go
That's
across the
exactly right.
whole thing. Okay.
Exactly right. I was working with a CFO who was talking about skip levels, and I said, "Look, you should really try a skip level into the marketing organization." And it really identified some really interesting cost
Interesting.
savings and insights that they perhaps wouldn't have got if he had been just doing the skip level within the finance organization.
Okay. I mean, we might get to this, but what if you have a humongous organization with thousands of people?
Yeah, I think you just have to be thoughtful, right? You can't.
Okay.
Again, like we said, this could be um, a detractor, as you described. We don't want them making mistakes on air, but you want to be thoughtful about how do you do it across the organization, and make sure that you are looking at different points of view. And I think that's a great segue into the second one, which is really making sure that you are focusing on blind spots. I think, well, first one, do be broad, but second one, also be targeted in areas that you are weak as a leader. Do a skip level into a space that you don't have the skills that you might have. I think technology is a blind spot for a lot of leaders, and I think it's clutch if you can get a
Hmm.
CEO to do a skip level with some junior developers who are going to give you insights that you may not have
Yeah.
otherwise. And so I think doing a skip level, focusing in an area that perhaps you have a blind spot, I think is really important way to look at it.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so good. And just being able to bring in that context for you.
Hmm. Yep,
It's so, and you have to be okay, because that could be really scary if you don't have any
absolutely.
idea what to ask. It's like, what do I say if you don't know that area of the business?
It reminds me of Brene Brown's Dare to Lead, which talks a lot
Yes.
about
I
vulnerability
was just
and the
thinking of her
importance
too.
of
Yeah.
having those skip level meetings as a leader, saying, "I don't understand this space."
Yeah.
That's one of really the classic books about being a good leader, and I think being vulnerable and ensuring that your people understand that you have some blind spots, and saying, "Hey, I'm going to work on that." by having a skip level in an area that I have a blind spot, it's a great way to address that.
Yeah, and it can't be that scary. You don't have to think about the right question to ask, but if you just go into it and say, "What is something I should know about what you do, or
Yep, yep,
how your area affects the business?" It just
right.
needs to be a very general, open-ended question.
Couldn't agree more. And I think that really, what a great segue into the third a piece of advice, which is really realize that while you as the leader are doing a skip level, maybe to get some insights, your attention to some of these folks is really going to spark some action on their end. The fact that you care, the fact that you showed some interest in what they're doing is going to go a long way. And so I
Yeah.
think, we'll spend a couple extra seconds if we've got some time to talk about the kind of questions. But really, when you are doing the skip level, you're going to really uh, have an opportunity to draw out and identify some really put some energy into the lower ranks. And I think that's a key element of a skip level.
I think that's so important, and I do have a question around that I
Hmm.
think might be a bonus. Is what do you? Is it confidential? And do
Great
you go
question.
back to the person that's between you and that other person, and do you report back to them or not?
Honestly, I always do. And because of our real, the overarching element here is we want skip levels to be building trust, right? And so certainly, A, saying we're going to do a skip level, everyone knows you're doing it. B, you're going to do it frequent, so they're not seen as punitive. But C, C, I think I went ABC. You want it to be creating trust not only with the skip level, but also your management. Now, just
Yeah.
like many things, you may not need to share everything, but I always like to say, hey, you know what, Rachel, I met with your team this week as described on, my monthly meeting with your team. Sounds like things are going well. So there was some concern about this particular, device on the showroom floor or in the assembly line. Can we talk about that? We hadn't heard about that before. Hey, there's no harm nor foul there. But the transparency, I think, across the board is so key.
Yeah, and it makes me think too, what did you say, Rachel? Was that the word?
That was probably the
If
name I
you go
came up with.
back,
Yeah,
that but she also needs to handle that feedback well, so
absolutely.
that
But
it doesn't close the door to there's a lot of things to be
future,
thoughtful around, so that when that comes back, she doesn't go back and go, "Why did you tell James
not
that
this. Yes,
we had some assembly line issues?"
right.
So
And
you
you know
got to
what?
be really have a discussion about it.
Yeah, I think. Look, there are hundreds of examples, and I think you and I have several of the recriminations that can occur due to skip level. This is like, you're finding the problems in your organization through this process. Like, if you can't trust your
Yeah.
manager or your people can't trust that, that trust isn't there, you got a bigger issue. Skip levels is not the problem, right? This is a tool, it is a metal detector, it'll help you find out where you got some areas of focus. Skip levels are an incredible tool. I have a tremendous amount of faith in them. I require them. I provide that as a recommendation for everybody, but it isn't the only tool in your toolbox.
That's very fair. Okay. Do you want to talk about questions or do you want to
Yeah,
wrap it up?
let's add maybe a bonus wheel here. Is that
Okay.
these questions need to be open ended. This is really
Yep.
where I think about Simon Sesnick's. Start with the why. Get to the point where
Yeah.
you're asking broader questions. Ask open-ended questions. Ask questions as if there were no constraints. I like the idea of saying to somebody, hey, if you had infinite number of resources, what problem would you solve at the company?
Mhm.
If you were in my
Yeah.
shoes, what would you fix? Those kind of
Yep.
things. I find if you go in and say, hey, what would you fix with our marketing group? That's a pretty pointed question. And
Yeah.
ultimately you might want to have that conversation, but to create that kind of dialogue, those open-ended questions are a much better way. They seem less like you're trying to catch somebody. They're less punitive. It's not as if you're trying to get info on one of your employees. That open-ended methodology is a great way to create that appropriate relationship.
I think that's great. And two tips on that before you do the three
Yep, yep.
is Open-ended questions are 7
Mhm.
words or less. And I only mention that
Mm.
because don't keep going on and on as
Oh,
leaders.
yeah.
Leave the context out. And so plan your questions, especially if that is kind of the thing that you always do, and practice silence after you ask the questions. See,
I love that.
negotiation happens all the time.
Oh, that is, I love it when, that's such a great piece of advice. I do, and I've witnessed many people saying, I asked an open-ended question. You did. And then you went on for 5 minutes
Exactly.
and closed that window. So there was only a yes or no answer. That's not an open-ended question. It does take practice.
Yes.
I think that's such a great observation. So, all right, let me bring it home. So, when it comes to skip levels, I think you need to remember that they are part of a broader effort to
Yeah.
encourage a collaborative conversation. And that first one, I think it's so important that you really have, these regular skip levels and you go broad. You structure them in a way that makes sense so they're not seen as punitive. First one. Second, allow them the opportunity, use these as an opportunity to go into areas that you may have a blind spot. Have a skip level with the group you're uncomfortable with. Show some vulnerability and say, hey, I don't know much about this. I'd like to learn more through a skip level. And then obviously allow these meetings to be realize they're not just for you, they're also for the people you're speaking with. Allow these one-on-ones, these skip levels, to spark some engagement and energy in them as well. So use these as an opportunity to motivate your group.
Yes, that was so good. I think that we believe that skip level is just such an easy thing to do. We're just going to schedule the
Just
meeting,
do the skip
but
level. Yep.
even just spending the time, we could have kept going. It
Yep.
just illustrates the point that you have to be very thoughtful about your approach. So
Totally agree.
great stuff. Great stuff, James. Thank you.